Okay, here we are. So we're now talking about companies, but just before we talk about companies, I want you to check whether you know stuff about sole traders and partnerships. If you don't, go back to the videos before because you need to know them. So you need to know the definition. Check whether you know the definition, pause the video. Also check whether you know advantages and disadvantages. Now remember, I don't care about you having 4 or 5 for each. There's no point. I want 2 good things and 2 bad things for each. For example, if you said unlimited liability as a downside, I want you to properly understand what I mean by unlimited liability. I don't want you just to say unlimited liability means if bailiffs come, they can take everything. That sounds rubbish. What I'd much rather you say was unlimited liability means you are the same legal entity as, or you have the same legal identity as your business. So if the business does badly, you do badly. That's the posh way of saying it. Anyway, so make sure you can do that. Okay, now I wanted to show you this slide because I love this slide, right? These are 4 different people. So we've got Kerry Katona down the bottom. She's gone bankrupt quite a lot. We've got Joe Swash. I think he won I'm a Celebrity, and then since then has done pretty much nothing. So he went bankrupt. This guy Shane Phelan from Westlife. Now, as you know, I'm a man who enjoys a bit of rubbish music, and I like Westlife. I even went to their concert once. It's a true story. But he went bankrupt because he tried to build those houses, and it didn't go well. And finally, Donald Trump has gone bankrupt, and I'm going to write a big number, 7 times. So this is like, Donald Trump is like the big guy in America. He does the American Apprentice, and he's gone bankrupt 7 times. Now the thing is, when these guys go bankrupt, or when, more importantly, I mean these guys have gone personally bankrupt, that's not good. You don't, because when you go personally bankrupt, they can take your car, they can take your house, they can everything. Why is it not as bad for Donald Trump? Why does he not mind going bankrupt 7 times? It's because he personally hasn't gone bankrupt, his businesses. I can't fit businesses in. His businesses have gone bankrupt. So when his business goes bankrupt, he just walks away and starts a new business. He's fine, don't matter, because he's got a separate legal identity to his business. And that's what we're going to be talking about today with limited companies. Right, here we are. So this is a bit of a rubbish slide, so bear with me here, but we're talking about 2 types of limited companies. And limited companies can be split into 2 ways. They can be split into PLCs, which is over here, a PLC, and a LTD. So there are 2 different sorts. Now you're going to see so many more LTDs because these are private limited companies, and a PLC is a public limited company. Now you just need to know very quick things like the definitions for these. They're not good. Like, rather than doing a definition, you just say a couple of things about them. So for example, I would say for a LTD, a private limited company, I'd say 2 things. One, it's a company that's got limited liability. So that's the first part of my definition. Luckily, it's also the first part of the definition for a PLC. So we've got limited liability. Right. I think I was meant to put limited liability in this box here. That's why. Anyway, who cares? Right. So they've both got limited liability. Now the second thing is where they're different. So that's the first half of your definition. You say a PLC or an LTD have got limited liability. This is the second part. In a private limited company, they've got limited liability and shares can only be bought when invited. So some people say, instead of when invited, some people say by family and friends, but I've decided I prefer when invited. Like for a PLC, you say it's got limited liability and shares are sold on the stock exchange. So, because they're sold on the stock exchange, anyone can buy shares of that company. So if I went up to my mate who owns a LTD and said, can I have shares? It's completely up to him. I couldn't just randomly buy shares in this company. Whereas as soon as you're on a PLC, you can anyone who wants to go to that market can buy those shares. So that's the big difference. But the thing that makes them the same is they've both got limited liability. Right. Welcome to a slightly rubbish slide again. This is private limited companies. Now we said this already, so I'm just kind of going over it. It's most common sort of company. So most companies are private limited companies. Very few are public limited companies. Secondly, the general public can't buy shares. So that's what that picture is all about. The only people who can buy shares. What am I trying to do there? I'm trying to do an arrow. The only people who can buy shares is people who are invited. The second thing, like I said before, they've got limited liability. And finally, you have to. That's not how you spell register. The hell? What does that mean? Right, anyway, if you want, I don't know what I'm doing there. You to become a private limited company, you have to go to somewhere called Company's House, and it normally costs like a certain amount of money to go to Company's House and set up a LTD. Now, this you could, if you want, say it's a downside of becoming a private limited company rather than a sole trader, because you have to actually pay to set it up. Okay, so this question comes up and they say, what is good and bad about a private limited company? And this is all they'll ever ask. They'll ask you to define it and say what's good and bad about it. They might say, Evan is deciding to go from being a sole trader to a private limited company. Do you think he should do it? And you've just got to be able to say 2 or 3 good things and 2 or 3 bad things and explain them, and you'll do well. Like the first one you're always going to pick, always, is this one, where you're going to say he's going to have limited liability. Now, the reason why that guy's hugging his car is, when you've got limited liability, if the business fails, you get to keep all your own possessions. They can't touch them. Now, I want you to use this posh word because it's just the way forward. When you've got limited liability, you get what do you get to say? You get to say you've got a separate legal identity, which means your business is a separate legal identity to you. So if your business goes down, it's got nothing to do with you because legally it's got a completely separate identity. Right, that's the first one I'd want to say. Second one, it's easier to raise finance. The reason why it's easier to raise finance is banks are more likely to trust you because they see you as a real company as opposed to just some random sole trader. And not only will you be able to raise finance easier, but you'll probably be able to pay less interest. Right. Now, this is a bit of a dodgy one, right? Because some people will get confused by this. You do have to publish your accounts, you do, but you don't have to publish your accounts as much as you do with a PLC. So you only have to publish like half your accounts compared to your PLC, which you have to publish all of them. So you could argue that's an advantage over a PLC. However, you could argue it's a disadvantage compared to a sole trader who don't have to give any information up. And then finally, not entirely sure why there's an old man there. Oh, I do. Okay, companies still exist even when shareholders change. So, for example, say the guy who owns a normal business, a sole trader, dies. It's probably going to be the end of it all. But with a company, if the owner dies, the other shareholders still own a part of the business, so the business keeps on going. Well, if I had to pick 2, I'd pick limited liability as a good one, and I'd say there's more privacies than a PLC is quite a good one. So is there anything else good about a private limited company that would be better? I suppose easier to raise finance. That's nice. And one of the main, I talked about banks earlier, but actually I'm talking rubbish really. I don't know really why I said it. The reason why it's easier to raise finance is because you can sell shares. That's what I meant to say. So if you can sell shares, that means you'll get money really quickly, and that's one of the main good ones. So limited liability and sell shares. Right, here are our 2 big downsides. Right, first of all, you have to have admin costs. So it costs you a lot of money to kind of set up your company, to do all your, I don't know what else you have to do. You have to do something called a memorandum and article of association. You have to go to somewhere called Company's House to set up. So there is a lot of admin costs. So by admin, I mean administration. Second bad thing is you have to publish an annual report, which you don't have to do as a sole trader. Now, this isn't as detailed as a PLC, but it still has to have some details. So your competitors and, in my example, like your friends, so any of my friends who have got a business, I always read their annual report because I just want to find out whether they're lying to me or not. I can't help it. I don't trust them. Okay, so when you've decided, instead of being a private limited company, you suddenly think, I want to become a public limited company. What's the main reason why you're going to do it? And this is the reason. Straight here, why would you want to become a PLC? Because you can make a ridiculous amount of money. Because suddenly your shares are sold on the stock exchange. So you can sell a portion of your business on that stock exchange and people will pay a lot of money for that. Right, on to advantages and disadvantages. So the top half are going to be advantages and then the second half are going to be disadvantages. So, to start off with, one of the main advantages is it's easier to raise money because you can ask anyone to buy shares and therefore they're going to give you loads of money for it. So that's a good thing. The second good thing is shares. Now this is nice. Shares can be given to workers to motivate them. So a lot of my friends who work at big companies, they're told, instead of giving you extra pay this year, we're going to give you shares in the company. So now they've got a share in the company. What do they want this company to do? They want this company to do well, which means when the company does well, the share price goes up. So that gives an incentive to work harder. So that's good for the company. And then finally, the advantage is there's still limited liability. So So there's only two types of things that have unlimited liability. That's a sole trader and a partnership. Everything else has got limited liability. So there you'd explain what that is. Now remember, you can't use that one if it's comparing a public limited company to a private limited company, because it's the same one. I mean, what can you say? Right, disadvantages. First of all, you can lose control of your business. Right, so if you suddenly sold 51% of your shares, someone else might be able to make decisions in your business because they'd have more shares than you. That'd be really annoying. Secondly, the firm could be taken over. So another company, so say you were like making chocolate and you had all your shares on the stock exchange, and then Cadbury's decided they liked you, they thought you were a good company. If they bought 51% of your shares, they now own you. Okay, you have to publish your accounts. Now, I know that's similar to a private limited company, but with a public limited company, you have to publish literally everything. There's nothing that gets hidden. And then, finally, you have to share your profits with your shareholders. So as nice as it was of those shareholders to give you money, they're going to want some of your profits in return. So you don't get everything. You don't get to keep everything. Right, I kept this in because I thought this is a nice kind of conclusion to it all, right? We've got to decide whether the following things are advantages or disadvantages, or both. Sorry, advantages or disadvantages for PLCs, LTDs, or both. Right, so, right, let's look at this. So, would you say this is a PLC advantage and an LTD advantage, or both? You can pause it and see if you've got the same as me. Right, business and owner are separate. That's both, because they've got limited liability, so that's a good thing. General public can view accounts. Now, this is a disadvantage for both. So I'm going to put, how can I do this? I'm going to put all the, I know what I'll do. Don't go away. I'm going to put all the disadvantages in red, and then I'm going to put all the other ones in green. So, business owner is separate, that's an advantage, but general public can view accounts is a disadvantage of both. Whereas the other one was don't go away, advantage for both. Right, easily borrow money to expand. Now I think that is actually, you could get away with saying it's an advantage for both, but it's even more of an advantage for a PLC because they can get even more money. Right, they can raise money by selling shares. I think that's both again. But again, remember, PLCs are going to be more easy to do that. Right, shares not to general public, only family and friends. So I say that is an advantage for an LTD. That means you won't lose control of your company. Right, they've both got limited liability, so you can put that there. Shares can be given to motivate workers. That is an advantage for a PLC. A small number of directors, I would say that's an advantage for an LTD. Right, a disadvantage for a PLC is you lose control. So I'm going to say PLC there. And complicated and expensive setup, that is definitely a disadvantage for a PLC. And finally, easy to get taken over by buying on the stock exchange, that's PLC again. Right, so go back over all this and think, can I get two good things and two bad things for each? And if you can, then you're sorted for that.